Hi, I'm Rick Hess, Director of Education Policy Studies at AEI. Delighted to welcome all of you to be with us today for this conversation, The Future of Teach for America, a conversation with Co-CEO Elisa Villanueva Beard. Also welcome to all of you who are watching on live stream, and for everyone, this will be available in its entirety on the AEI website tomorrow. Teach for America, most of you are familiar with. It's a national education nonprofit that recruits, selects, and trains individuals to teach in low-income communities for a specified period of service, typically for at least 2 years. It was founded in 1990 by Wendy Kopp, who proposed the idea, as many may know, in her senior thesis when she was an undergraduate at Princeton. That initial year, there were only 500 teachers in 6 regions across the entire U.S. Today, TFA has more than 10,500 teachers in classrooms in 35 states. Those 10,000 plus teachers are impacting more than 750,000 kids in 2,600 schools. TFA accounts for less than 1% of the nation's teaching force, but it trains more new teachers than any other source in the country, and it's responsible for more Latino and African American teachers in this country than any other teacher preparation program in the U.S. TFA also boasts an alumni network of over 30,000, including many folks who have dug in and done a lot of really interesting work in the last quarter century. One of them, folks in town will be familiar with, is our good friend, the Chancellor of the D.C. Public Schools, Kaya Henderson. Lisa's going to talk with us today a little bit about where TFA is heading. Those of you who have been following the goings-on campus and in news coverage know that TFA has taken some criticisms in the last couple of years. She'll be able to talk a little bit about that, and we'll certainly get into talking about how to think about the validity and the accuracy of some of those criticisms in the course of this conversation. But first, I want to bring Elisa up here to share some thoughts with you on where TFA has been and where it's going. Elisa started with TFA 16 years ago in Phoenix, where she taught first and second grade bilingual education as a 1998 core member. In 2001, she became a regional executive director for TFA, led the organization's work in her hometown in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. In 2005, Elisa became TFA's National Chief Operating Officer, leading its field operations. Under her leadership, TFA grew from 22 to 46 regions across the U.S. In 2013, when Wendy Kopp stepped down from her role, which she had enjoyed since founding the organization, Elisa and Matt Kramer assumed the duties of co-CEOs, and that is the role Elisa speaks to you in today. Elisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is so good to be here. So I want to start off by sharing a little bit more about my background and what brings me to this work. I grew up in South Texas in the Rio Grande Valley, if people are familiar, right on the border of Texas, 10 miles north of the Mexican border. My mom came to the United States from Mexico at the age of 17 with a formal 8th grade education, and my dad's family is also from Mexico. And quickly in my family, my mom figured out when she got to the U.S. that education was everything, and it was the most important thing if her kids were going to have access and opportunity. And so I always knew I was going to go to college because of that. And I never imagined, though, I'd end up at DePauw University in Greencastle, Indiana, which is where I went to school, which is a small liberal arts college, is southwest of Indianapolis. And I got there because of a mentor who just thought, I need to convince this girl to get uncomfortable and go somewhere that she's unfamiliar with. Well, I showed up to DePauw with 3 pieces of luggage all by myself because my parents couldn't afford to take me. And I quickly realized that I was in what felt like a foreign country to me. The Rio Grande Valley is like 90% Mexican American, and DePauw is not. And I, was fascinated with things like when I started to get to know people around me, I never knew at the age of 18 that white people could be Catholic, for example. And it's really true. I didn't know not everyone knew what pozole and tamales were and things like that. And so I felt like, wow, these are foreign people around me. And I was, in fact, foreign to the people around me as well. That was fun. What was not fun was that once I got into the coursework, I quickly came to realize how underprepared I was for the rigors of college. I was a top kid at my high school. You would have bet on me to do well in college. And I realized that I did not have all the skills that to compete with my peers in that moment. I had never been taught how to take notes. I had never had to read so much text, synthesize, and then show up to class and have a seminar-style discussion and have an aggressive point of view and quickly realize, like, wow, all the people around me have been doing this their entire life. But I learned how to do it, and I ended up doing well at DePauw. But it did lead me to start asking the question of why is DePauw 3% Latino and 5% Black? Why am I struggling so much? And I started to watch kids that I graduated from not go to college, those that did dropped out of college, and started to ask myself these big questions. Well, there was a friend that was back on campus my sophomore year in college. Her name is Carla, and she was teaching in Phoenix. And she was talking about her kids that she was teaching in a remarkable way. She was like, my kids' potential, all that she was doing to deliver on a great education for them was remarkable. And I remember sitting there listening to her and thinking, I want to be part of a team of people who believe this much in the potential of our kids. And so that's what drew me to Teach for America, and gratefully I got in 1998 and have stuck with it ever since. And that is why I do this work every day. It's a personal thing. It's not about statistics, for me at least. So yesterday I spent the day on the Hill, and as you all know, ESCA is the big topic of conversation that we are having today, and I actually felt optimistic after my day. Rick asked, are you optimistic it's going to pass or good policy is going to pass? I'm optimistic about the whole thing, and I think there's a real opportunity for us to find bipartisan, bipartisan negotiation and bill that's going to be great for kids. As I was reflecting on, being on the Hill, I was just thinking about all the progress that really has been made in our country in the last 15 years that I just think is really important for us to remember. African American, Latino kids are doing so much better today than they were 15 years ago. When you look at high school graduation rates, you look at the NAEP scores, and I think that is encouraging and inspiring for me. And, the other thing that I often think about is, 25 years ago, if we were having this talk, a topic of conversation might be, are kids growing up in low-income communities and kids of color, can they really perform at the same level as their more affluent peers? Can they really perform at the same level as white kids? And today, that is not a conversation that can happen because there is no debate about that. There are hundreds of schools in America today that are serving low-income communities, kids of color that are performing at the same level as their more affluent peers, and that is powerful and I think should give us inspiration of how much progress that we have made. So I want to talk a little bit about the role of Teach for America in all of this. But before I do, I want to share 3 reflections that I've had as I've been a part of this work now for almost 17 years. The first is that this work is really, really hard, and it is a journey. It is incredibly hard to do the work of preparing and supporting teachers and leaders to be thoughtful, get results, be values-driven, et cetera, is just really hard work, and impact comes with time. And I often have to remind myself, I find inspiration from Teddy Roosevelt's Man in the Arena. It is much harder to be in it, failing boldly, getting back up, and being fully alive than to be on the sidelines sort of critiquing what's going on in the arena. And so I find inspiration from that, especially these days. I've also learned that we have to ensure that we are truly building a coalition that is incredibly diverse to do this work. That, in fact, you need people who are, educators, policymakers, philanthropists, people that represent the communities that we work with, people that don't. That, in fact, what's going to literally change what we are tackling here is a diversity of perspective and thought, and people channeling all of their energy against this. And it's so important that we create conversations like these, which I'm very appreciative of Rick for always having an open conversation and pushing us. And it really is going to take the investment of such a diverse group of people to do this work. And then finally, that this work truly also, the way we talk about the problem we're solving is that it's a real systemic issue, that it's not one sole group or anything that is causing the problem. It's a true systemic issue that requires leadership from in the system and outside of the system, and truly working alongside parents and communities. And that because of that, Rick, you've written about this too, that we have to be very aware of all of the issues beyond just education impacting our kids, that poverty matters, that it matters that kids don't have access to health care. It matters that kids are sleeping in cars and showing up to school. It matters that kids don't have access to dental care. And all of this really matters. And so what this also means is that you will see Teach for America advocating for policies that we believe are in concert with expanding educational opportunities for kids. We believe in opportunity for all. And it means that sometimes we will upset people on the left. It means sometimes we will upset people on the right. But ultimately, we're trying to make the right decisions for kids every day in ensuring true opportunity. The other thing that I've learned is that we have to be unapologetic about the fact that this is about race, class, and privilege. 95% of the kids that we teach are Latino or African American or Asian American Native communities, and all are from low-income communities. And so we have to just be very aware of that and have discussions that are honest about that as we do this work. And so in terms of how Teach for America has contributed to this over the last 24 years, is our role is pretty simple in all of this. We believe that we need to we seek to enlist and channel the energy of some of the most promising future leaders and young professionals to commit themselves to life against this issue of educational equity and excellence every day. We start by asking people to take one of the greatest acts of leadership, which is to teach for at least 2 years. And many, actually 60% of our folks end up staying a third year. But the idea here is that we put folks, there's a difference between reading books like Savage Inequality and things of that nature, difference from that in actually going and having to teach in schools with real kids and deeply understanding the potential of our kids, realizing our kids really can do anything when we expect them to, and we provide the supports that are necessary, and also to deeply understand the complexity of the issues facing our children. And the idea of TFA has been, once you get people in this classroom and they realize what's possible, you can't turn away from that. Suddenly, other people's kids become your kids. And you realize that this truly is a matter of justice and equity, and you have to remain a part of it. And what we have seen with alums is 67% of our alumni, which, as Rick said, is 37,000 strong at this point, have remained in education, which is pretty remarkable because 85% say, if it were not for Teach for America, there's no way I would be going into education. And when we look at our entire alumni base, which we have data for the vast majority, nearly 90% of them are either working in education or in low-income communities somehow. So it speaks to the power of transformation that our folks have as they commit themselves to this fight for the rest of their lives. in terms of what our folks are up to, so we have 20,000 teachers right now that include 10,000 core members, 11,000 alumni, 21,000 teachers. We have 800 school principals across the country. We have almost 250 system leaders, Chancellor Henderson being one of those, and many others working across the system in cabinet positions as leading systems in the actual school districts, but also in the states. So we have a few commissioners of education. We have 50 social entrepreneurs in the last 2 years. I don't know if you have seen the Forbes 30 under 30, but this year 8 of our alumni were recognized in that. Last year 9 of them were recognized as these incredible entrepreneurs. We have nearly 100 elected officials, and we are the single largest producer of teachers for public schools in America today. So the other thing I will say is 95% of our principals say that they want more teachers each year. And so we, in sum, will say we are having a positive impact in our country, and that's sort of what we've been able to do. And this big idea is truly alive in America today. And so in terms of what I want to talk a little bit about today, now that we understand our impact, I want to talk a little bit about growth and scale. I want to talk about our focus on local communities, and then I want to talk about innovation as a path forward for us as we look ahead. And then I'm also going to touch on culture, and I'm going to talk a little bit about recruitment, since no doubt everyone read this New York Times article, and I'd like to provide my perspective on that. And I'm checking myself for time here. Okay. So we started off small. In 1990, we started off with 6 regions, and we had 384 people decide that they wanted to be part of that first core. Today, we're in 50 regions, 35 states in the District of Columbia, and we have over 10,000 teachers amongst our ranks currently teaching. And we decided in 2000 that, there was just such a demand for us to continue to bring more and more teachers, and decided that we were really going to pursue this growth, that we were going to pursue growth and growing to scale. And we came to realize that there's a difference between being like just really good and small. There's a difference between being, really big and bad, and that we wanted to be really big and good. And this was our aspiration, and that we knew that scale mattered a lot, and we needed to pursue that. So we ventured to do this while actually improving quality as we went along. And so we went from 22 regions in 2005 to 50 regions today. We grew remarkably fast during this time. And I would say that we feel good about how we scaled and what we have produced. We've been able to reach many more communities. As we look at our indicators that matter a lot to us, our applicant quality is stronger than ever. Our core member impact is also incredibly strong. We have now enough third-party studies that indicate that our teachers are just as good and many times better than the first-year teachers and novice teachers in their own schools where they teach. Our principal satisfaction with core members is incredibly high, and demand has never been higher for our teachers. And so all of this was critical for us to reach scale, but we are also now in a phase where we are at scale and also understanding the consequences of growing so aggressively. The last 6 years, we grew like 30%. And so we are focused, we stretched our capacity, our staff to the utmost capacity. And we also did things like are a very goal-oriented organization. It's in our DNA, which is a good thing. But as we were scaling, we also neglected other things. We didn't always prioritize building community and cohesion amongst our core members. We didn't always prioritize ensuring that our core members were feeling fully part of something that was big and mattered and really connected with us, and providing all that they needed to ensure that they were fully successful, and felt good about it. Despite the successes that we did see as in what they did with their kids every single day. So where we are now is that we have come to realize that, so in order to do this, we centralized, which meant we had a command and control way of operating. Because for you to scale that fast and maintain quality or even improve quality, you've got to really manage the heck out of things, which was how we did things. Now that we're at scale, what we realized a couple years ago is to get to the next phase of impact, that we needed to really be localized and really relevant to each community where we work. And so this is the second thing that's an important shift for us. We came to understand that, movements are going to be built locally. Unstoppable movements need to be built community by community. The needs of every community are so different. What DC needs is entirely different from what Los Angeles needs, from the Mississippi Delta, from the Rio Grande Valley. So building strategy in the center and pushing it out does not make sense. People need different things. And if we're going to unleash innovation, we need to just unleash the leadership of everybody within our organization. And so we are in the middle of this shift from being, centralized to decentralizing and providing more empowerment and autonomy. And the idea here is that we are going to see a lot more innovation emerge. And so that's the next thing I want to talk about, innovation in our model, and this being central to how we move forward. When Matt and I started in this role, we heard a lot from lots of different people. And we became convinced and affirmed that the model of TFA works, and it's really important that we stick with it. But there's also lots of things that we were learning that we think we can evolve and do differently, and increase our impact as we do that. And so I want to talk just a moment about that. So, for example, we are innovating on our pre-service model at the moment. So, the way we run things is we have a central institute. We have 9 of them, where we train all of our teachers. And we decided a couple years ago to try running local institutes. So for a region, Memphis, for example, was one of our pilot regions, would literally train their people in Memphis, which meant you had this continuity. They got their staff to train these folks that would then end up placing them and supporting them. You had folks now that, rather than being trained in Houston, Texas, were able to learn about their context, the history of the community, were able to teach kids that they would actually be teaching. You're teaching in the schools where you actually will be teaching. Some of our regions have been able to increase time on task, so more time actually teaching kids, and nothing but good things can come from that. And so we're learning a lot from that. And as a result, this summer we will have 9 of these regional institutes, while still maintaining the central institutes. And that's just an important thing. 2 other pilots that we're running right now at Teach for America are, one, supporting 3rd, 4th, and 5th year teachers. So as I said previously, we have 11,000 alumni teachers. And because this is a 2-year commitment, we stop supporting people after 2 years. Well, when you have 60% of your teachers actually stay on for a 3rd year, why not consider how you create a learning community and also accelerate your teachers' impact? And so we have begun to test that. We're in the middle of that pilot right this minute, and we're going to see what we learn from that and see if, what people's need and feel more supported and in order to accelerate their impact. And then finally, the other national pilot that we're running is a pre-service one where we accept a cohort of juniors into Teach for America. So as they go into their senior year, they actually know what they're doing. And so we have a group of 48 folks right now that are actually going through a training program with us. And we're going to see what we learn from that. It seems like there is good momentum around it. And the idea here is, will these folks accelerate their impact more than others that do not go through this program? And so we are excited to see what we learn from that, but it'll be a couple years before we have actual data around that. And then lastly, what I will say is, like, in regions, we're just watching people do interesting things now that they really have the space to do it. We have regions that are taking on technology and how to really think about training and supporting their teachers as in a really central way, how to think about coaches in this context, et cetera. So we're just excited about that as our future here. And the other thing that I will say is around this cohesion piece as one of our priorities. We have come to realize that this is just really important. People need to feel like they're part of something that's just much bigger than them and that matters. And especially in this context with the vitriolic nature of the conversation, it's important that our folks are fully grounded, know that they're a part of something that matters and is having a positive contribution to the work. And so that is something that we will be prioritizing as we move forward. And it's worth noting that for many years, as we, Teach for America has always been an organization that's been critiqued since its founding. It's a different idea. It's not intuitive. But the last 3 years in particular, I would say, have been incredibly, the uptick of this has gone up quite significantly. And the way that we responded at the time was, just be really good. Put your head down, get things done, and get results. And if you get results, everything's going to fix itself because that speaks for itself. Well, apparently, this is not the way the world works, is what we've learned. And so I often say, there was a basketball game happening, and we didn't realize we should have been playing in it. We were watching from the bleachers. So I would say about 18 months ago, we put on our tennis shoes. We learned how to tie them. We have a uniform on. And now we're learning how to play in the game. And all to say that, we are definitely not about picking fights with anybody, but we're at a place where we won't run from them either, and are unapologetic about, taking them on and dealing with what's in front of us, and also being convicted and grounded in the impact that we are having every day. So the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to go have a seat to talk to Rick, is I want to address the recruitment situation that we're currently in. And no doubt many of y'all read the New York Times article on Friday. And so in order to understand this, what I would say is, you sort of need to understand the last 6 years of our trajectory. And I talked about how fast we grew, in particular, the last 10 years. And so we hit a point about midway through those 6 years, like 3 years ago, where we actually had more supply than demand. And the reason we had less demand is not because the principals wanted us less. It was because when we were growing dramatically, there had been the stimulus funding that was provided, and that was falling off. And so districts were, contracting, and we literally had people on wait lists. We almost had 1,000 people on a wait list one year. And so that caused us to do what I think any sort of logical person would do, which is pull back on your recruitment efforts and say, you know what, we don't want to create more supply than demand. That's not good for anybody. And so maybe we can create efficiencies, and maybe we can actually get economies of scale, which our funders would love for us to find economies of scale when it comes to recruitment. So we did that. So simultaneously to that happening, what's happening alongside this is the economy is recovering. And so what you start to find is, the people we're going after actually have many, many more options and are highly sought after by so many others. We missed the boat on sort of the millennial motivation and what is, and sort of what is their mindset and what they are seeking. They're seeking financial sustainability. They are looking for things that they can really commit to. They are more worried about taking this risk. And we had not sort of updated our own value proposition. And what we are watching happening right now is banks and corporations and others really have figured out how to make this value proposition and are somehow convincing young folks that coming to them is, the service-oriented thing to do, and they can really make a difference. And we are behind the 8 ball on that. And the last thing I will say is, the vitriolic nature of this conversation is not helpful to anybody. I mean, the truth is that doing Teach for America today actually takes courage. You know that you are part of something that is creating a wave. You know that you're part of something that is part of change and people are paying attention. When I did TFA almost 17 years ago now, that was not the case. And even 5 years ago, I would argue that was sort of not the choice in front of you. And that takes courage. People don't like to get in the middle of that. Most Americans don't, at least. And so what we're doing is we're just re-gearing on all of this. We know that, what's ahead of us is going to be tough, but we actually feel optimistic about how we're going to be able to re-gear with innovation and creative ideas in how we're recruiting folks, how we're training them and supporting them, and really sharing with people that if you want to be part of changing the world, you ought to join us. And so we are optimistic about the future. And I will say that it is important to actually keep perspective on the whole thing. The broader trend for Teach for America over the last 15 years is that many people are interested in being part of this. The last time the economy was strong, we have twice as many applications than we did then. So we are truly in strong footing. And the truth is that we will still be the largest provider of teachers even next year, despite this, this drop that we are going to experience this year. So in closing, all I will say is that, we are excited to figure out how we can continue to work alongside many others to make, to fully contribute towards this problem of educational excellence and equity that many feel passionate about. And we stand to be ideological about one thing, which is a radical belief in our children and their potential and their families. But other than that, look forward to just continuing to learn and reflect and do better and fully contribute and fail boldly and succeed boldly as well. So thanks so much.
For those of you here or watching online who want to tweet questions or what have you, the hashtag for the event is TFA at AEI, capital TFA at capital AEI. Great. Well, Lisa, thanks. That was terrific. It was interesting. I'd love to start maybe with a couple of things that you touched on at the end.
Yeah.
So one, you mentioned kind of in closing that you said, look, it requires courage to join TFA today that maybe it didn't 17 years ago and maybe it didn't 5 years ago. Just curious to hear you talk a little bit about what's changed.
Yeah. So people care about what people's friends think and what their parents think and what family thinks about the choices they're making right out of college. That's a natural, normal thing. It's particularly acute with this generation of folks. It really matters. And I've been spending a lot of time on college campuses to just myself deeply understand all the issues. And I met with this woman at Rice University the other day, and I was meeting with a bunch of folks, and she signed up, and I was like, oh, she's already been accepted into the Corps. I wonder why she signed up. I'm like, okay, well, I'll talk to anybody. And so we sat there and talked, and she was telling me about her brother who does the Boston residency program. And she said, my brother calls us Temps for America. And I said, he calls us Temps for America. I said, really? I said, how does that make you feel? And she said, well, I so deeply believe in all that I've read about what Teach for America has done and contributed, and I want to be part of that. And she said, but I have a few questions on how I can answer his question. And so we talked through the various issues, and it just struck me how convicted and clear she was, and a little bit proud. Like, I'm part of something that is actually, that matters and a lot of people are paying attention to. And if you're part of something like that, it does create ripples, and it gets people's attention. And I think that's a lot of what's happening now. I mean, I was just with a core member who had the same story he's a gentleman and was talking about his brother with the same sort of level of critique, yet so, like believes so deeply in this. And I just, and to the point of like us not forcefully, sharing what we're about, the fact that TFA now has 50% of its core members are people of color. We get critiqued so much because we're this, white Ivy League folks that, I don't know, are culturally incompetent and going into communities and, whatever. And that's not, and so we're working on getting our story out there proactively. And I think listening to these two as just examples, and I have many more, it's pretty courageous and I think inspiring, actually. And I'm excited to see what they do in the classroom.
So, and I'm curious, because, we've known each other a long time. I've been somebody who has occasionally, had skepticisms, criticisms of TFA, but it's interesting to me, given how you came to TFA, the passion you bring to the work, the passion so many TFAers bring to it. For instance, my friend Diane Ravitch wrote at one point, she is, that a TFA is working to destroy the American public education system. What do you think, what are critics seeing when they offer these kinds of criticisms?
Yeah.
And how did those criticisms take root?
Yeah, so I don't understand what that fully means, but what I think is happening is I talked about the fact that, 25 years ago, we didn't have many schools that were serving kids and putting them on a track to and through college. We have many of those now. And I think when you just have change, like the fact is, kids growing up in low-income communities now and kids of color are not getting the education they deserve. No one can argue with that. And despite the progress, which we should all find inspiration from, it is still spectacularly depressing. The fact that Latino kids in Houston, 7% will graduate to and through college. Poor kids, 1 in 10 will get to and through college by the age of 25, is unacceptable. That's an unacceptable thing. And when you have folks who are just making bold statements like, I remember, when we used to not use data in education. Really, like there was no information every year that parents and students had about how their kids were doing. It's a lot of focus on inputs and not outputs. And data can be misused. We all know the disasters going on with data. Data is one part of a lot of things that matter when educating kids, but it's an important point because parents need to know the truth. Parents should have, be empowered, and so should students to then make choices about schools and options and where, they want their kids to go. And I think, the truth is that many of our alumni are in positions of leadership now that are making bold statements and bold change, and some might be more graceful and thoughtful than others, but nonetheless it's happening, and it's all associated with Teach for America. If you look at just like the highest performing charters in America right now, KIPP, Yes College Prep, Idea College, and Academy in the Rio Grande Valley, those were all founded by Teach for America alumni. The vast majority of them have principals that are Teach for America alumni, are staffed by Teach for America alumni and core members. The two fastest improving systems in America last year, DC Public Schools, which has Ms. Henderson has done incredible work, and there are lots of Teach for America alumni on her staff, leading schools, managing principals. The past 5 Teachers of the Year have been TFA alumni in Washington, D.C. And then Tennessee, the Commissioner of Education, Kevin Huffman, who just retired from his post in January, is a TFA alum, and he made bold statements about accountability and just holding folks accountable to results and tests. And so those are big changes, and that is scary. And it's not to say that we've done things right or well in every move. But what you do find from us is a commitment to reflect and get better. And that's what we're a part of. But I think the whole notion of stirring things up is scary for folks. And And I think that's where a lot of it comes from.
And as you know, another criticism one hears is that the TFA emphasis on bringing folks in, not necessarily to teach for 30 years, but for a 2 or 3 or 5-year stint, is deprofessionalized teaching or creates instability in these schools and communities. How do you think about that concern?
I get very worked up about that concern. So, you know what? If we could find experienced teachers or teachers that wanted to teach in the schools where we teach, amen, brothers and sisters. Let's do it. Let's do it. I will tell you from my observations teaching in one of these schools and from what I see everywhere, teachers are not running to teach in poor communities with Latino and African American children. That is not happening. And they're not staying long. I mean, we're staying, at least you get a 2-year commitment from us. And 60% stay for a 3rd year. That is, I mean, our attrition rates are not worse than other teachers there. I'm not saying that that's better, and I know that's a relative bar, and we shouldn't be about relativism here. But what I am saying is that, I get this argument like, why aren't we taking suburban teachers to come teach in our lowest performing schools? Let's do it. Figure out how to do that. Let's do it. I mean, that would be amazing. I don't know if it would fully be amazing because people would really need to teach these particular kids and want to get to really understand their assets and all that they bring to the table, but it's a different animal. And so what you get from us is nothing temporary. What you get from us is a person that is going to give it everything they've got for the time that they are there. And they are going to be committed for life. Many stay in education. As I said earlier, 67% of our alums stay in education. There is nothing temporary about that, and the vast majority end up working with kids in low-income communities and in education. And that is profound. And the honest truth is, if we just look at education across the board, teachers are not staying in education. This is an American problem, beyond Teach for America. And I think we need to start really addressing, like, what are the policies and things we need to really be addressing to get to the root causes of this. And we're easy to point out and pay attention to, but what we find time and time and again is our principals want us. The demand cannot be higher. And as I talk to principals, they say, I'll take your teacher for 2 years. I will take your teacher for 2 years. I know what I'm gonna get. Will you just make sure you get me another one if they leave? And then they work really hard to keep them there. And many are successful at keeping them beyond 2 years. And so, yeah.
So, and I wanna pivot in just a sec and ask you about some of the specific lessons you've learned about selecting folks and training. But there was one quote from a longtime friend of TFA in last week's New York Times story, which you alluded to, which I'd just be curious how you think about it. Katie Haycock, the president of the Education Trust, said, TFA is still a Band-Aid, even if it's a better Band-Aid. Is that fair? Is that accurate?
I would say, and Katie is a friend and a colleague, but I would say that is not accurate or fair. And the reason for that is because we have never said that we are going to solve this problem with teachers. That's not our role. Our role is to provide talent into this, and many choose to stay into teaching, and we think that's awesome. As you said earlier, we're 1% of teachers. We're not trying to solve this problem through teaching, although we're all about teachers. We bring people into teaching, we want to support them. They have to be excellent for kids every year. But what we are trying to do is provide incredible leadership to the system that go on to be principals, that go on to be system leaders, that go on to be policymakers. I have a friend in the Rio Grande Valley who is not from there. She's from California. Came to the Rio Grande Valley to teach and has never left, and she has had a passion for healthcare. And so she herself has went to med school and opened a clinic in a low-income community. We need that. And so this is not about a Band-Aid. This is about creating leadership in the classroom and beyond, and that's what we're about.
So you mentioned that the value proposition for millennials has changed over the 25 years you guys have been doing this.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what have you guys learned and what have you started to try to do to make this path as appealing to college graduates in 2015 as it was in 1995?
Yeah. I mean, what we're learning is just different things that we're then enacting as we, go into this next season of recruitment, which this season ends March 6th, and we will start doing this on March 7th. So a few things we've learned. One is this is a generation that is incredibly entrepreneurial. I mean, they want massive leadership jobs, and they want access to senior people and are compelled when they are talking to, I don't know, many people in this room. And at the moment, we have 24-year-olds that are recruiters, and they've always been, and they're very effective. I mean, they're so compelling and they're so good, but somehow they want, to be meeting with senior leaders. So we literally have 100 senior leaders at TFA that are, for the first time ever, really spending a significant amount of time on campus to have these conversations. These folks, the use of technology, I mean, we just have not kept up with, they are sitting in the room, and rather than talk to each other, they're texting and, I don't know, on all these social media outlets, which I find is amazing. And we need to figure out how you better compel and communicate folks. This generation of folks want to do something that is unique and special. They want to feel like I am choosing something that is different and is unique, and that's fair. And when you have 5,000 new teachers, 4,000 new teachers you're bringing in at once, that doesn't feel so unique and special. And so we're thinking a lot about how we have to switch how we do this, and thinking maybe we need to create different tracks and fellowships where, people are attracted to Teach for America for different reasons. Some people say, I want to go into policy, and that's actually what I know I want to do. And so what if we created an entire fellowship that you applied for and got to sort of develop your passion, get access to great policymakers and lessons or whatever. And so we're just thinking creatively about things like that we're going to have to do as we think about recruitment and, training and supporting our teachers that truly threads through their entire experience.
And is this stuff being more informed by anecdotal experience and observing, or are you guys also doing surveys, or how do you try to get your hands around the stuff you're talking about?
Yeah, all of it. I mean, we do market research where we're actually, researching and talking with and having discussions with folks about what is exciting to them about this, why are they not interested, what would have to be true for them to feel like this is an interesting thing. We're obviously doing a lot of reading about this generation of folks, and and sort of together with all of this, and then anecdotally we're just constantly in conversations with these guys and sharing. Is this resonating with you all? What I'm hearing here, and and so.
When you think about the way that you prepare and support teachers, which you talked about some before, both kind of summer preparation before they start and then while they're in the classrooms, if folks say, well, what are 3 things you're doing differently than you did a decade ago, what would you point to?
Yeah. Well, what I would say is, one is, as we think about just training our teachers, we have a lot of focus now on understanding context and history. One of the things you and I have talked about is, how do you get passionate and aggressive, not aggressive, but you know what I mean, assertive and confident people to join you, but also to be thoughtful and humble at the same time. How do you create this, because you're going in very different environments. And so one of the things that we've done is we just need our folks to understand that many people have been working on this problem for many, many years, way before Teach for America showed up. And that understanding the history of education in a community, understanding how communities have fought for equity and excellence in schools is really important. Understanding communities, talking with parents and students and understanding what they care about, how they see the problem, do they see a problem? And what our role needs to be. And that's something that is quite different than what we did. And that's what has, enticed us to do these local institutes, because the sooner we can do that, the better. The other thing that is attached to that is we have really dialed up this whole piece around just identity development for all. No matter who you are, you are going into a context that, some people have some exposure to. But even me, who grew up in the Rio Grande Valley and, the county that I grew up is one of the poorest counties in the country. And you all heard my background. And I taught all Latino kids, like all Mexican kids in Phoenix when I went there. And I remember my first semester, one parent, she called me white. And I'm like, what? I'm like, my last name is Villanueva. What are you talking about? My mom went, and I started to justify why I'm Mexican. And she's like, no, you're white. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, you talk white, you dress white. Like, I don't know. You don't seem like you're from my people. And that stuff just matters as you carry yourself in a community. So it doesn't matter who you are. And one of the big things that we have really focused on is the assets in our community. Our communities have so many assets, yet I think we tend to approach them with lots of deficit, all the things that are wrong. And there's lots of challenges, and it's true. But the strength of a community, I mean, the way we all feel good is, hey, focus on what I'm good at. Like, help me show you the things that I'm bringing to the table, and when you meet me halfway there, then I trust you, and we can work together to make the most progress. And so we've really turned our attention to that, and think it's just incredibly important to do that.
And so along the way, as you think about the changes you guys have made in terms of trying to select applicants, because you've got, right, even with your downturn, you've got, what percent of applicants are you accepting? 14%. So as you guys think about which 14% to accept, have there been changes you've made or things you've learned, again, say in the last 10, 15 years that might be useful for folks to recognize?
Sure. I mean, we have a model where we study it every single year pretty aggressively. And the way we study it is we go and we learn from our best teachers. Who are our best teachers and what skills and attributes did they have when they joined us? And then what do we learn from the very best teachers? Like, what are they displaying when they're at their height? And is there a way to select for that?
And as best teachers, student growth and on state assessments, or?
So we look at, for sure, actual data of what teachers are doing. But we actually have also learned, and this is another lesson, like we have to focus on much more than just that. So we're also looking for is this, like, what we call transformational impact, like this enduring impact with kids. So when you go talk to kids, what we're listening for are kids that are self-motivated, that they understand, like, we believe deeply in growth mindset, that kids can just grow, and they can, if they have the confidence and understanding, they can truly be empowered to be, learners and leaders. And so we're listening for kids to say, yeah, I have a goal, and here's what I am up to this year, and this is why it's important, and this is why it matters beyond this year. This is why it matters in 5 years. This is why it matters in 10 years, and they have a thought on what they want to do with their life. It's not that we even are trying to get them to say, I want to go to college, although I think every kid should be prepared to have the choice to go to college. But we want them to have dreams and ideas of what is in front of them and that they can do anything that they want. We're looking for people to have confidence and feel like they're challenged deeply. The kids, I'm challenged, I persist, I fail, but I get up. And these are things that are truly enduring. And so we have, of course, our rubric of things that we are looking for. And so it's a set of all of those things that to us we would describe as a good teacher. And at the center of that is a very strong relationship between the teacher and the student. We've actually found the teachers that make the most progress from going from good to great are those that have serious, authentic relationships with their kids. It's like they love their kids, not like love, but like, and the way we describe love is where, I'm a mom of 4 boys, where I would want my kids playing with the kids that I teach. Like, I want them part of my community. And that kind of love is powerful because kids know you believe in them. Kids know you're in it with them. And you're going to do everything in your power to ensure they get the opportunity they deserve. So
what are a couple things you guys have learned about how you find teachers to bring that to the table? So
we look for leadership. I mean, anyone that does teacher training or selection of interviews or people, you say, what are the things you have to look in past behavior the behavior of the past is the best indicator of the future. So what we're looking for is people that have led boldly, have demonstrated real leadership through actually leading things, through achievement, through putting themselves through college. So there's different levels of achievement have just proved to be an important indicator for us. We're looking for people that have persisted through hard things, who have, failed boldly, but get back up and continue. And that's just an important thing to recognize and note. We are looking for people that talk about our communities in an asset-based way, that truly do feel like, are respectful and humble. We're looking for people that really want to be being part of change. Like, if we say this, and I say this to people in selection, if you're looking for a teacher placement agency, and that, if you get placed in second grade or all you want is to be placed in second grade, and if you don't teach X, Y, or Z, you're going to be disappointed, then this is not the thing for you. I mean, that's not what we're doing. We want you to join us. You're going to go where you're most needed. We're going to, of course, try to place you where you want to go. But, we need you to be keep the bigger picture here in mind. And then the other thing that we've most recently learned is the folks that are most successful are people that actually have experience in low-income communities. So not that you were from a low-income community necessarily, although that counts too, but that this is not the first time that you are authentically engaging in a low-income community with kids of color. That it actually matters that you've have some sort of understanding, some relationship, and that actually does matter. And so there's not one thing that you privilege over anything else, but it's the combination of those things that ends up coming together. And the other thing I will say is being organized, like not type A, highly, highly organized, although that works well for us too. But being just organized, being able to manage lots of things at once actually has been an important indicator of our most successful teachers, and you can imagine why, but because there's a lot coming at you that you have to manage. So yeah.
That's great. I'm going to throw out to the audience, but just one quick question before we go there is, so number of folks have been accepted into Teach for America. As you shared with me, and as we know, there are folks who are telling them it would be a bad thing to join TFA, that somehow that this would be a bad choice in terms of the kids. What do you say to the folks who, those folks who've been accepted, about how they should regard this pushback? And what do you say on campus when you talk to folks who are saying, we want TFA banned from our campus? We think we don't think our college should be part of encouraging people to join TFA.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to say this really any more gracefully than I just think it is pretty, I might use the word irresponsible. I think it is really bad that we have anyone that is trying to work against young people joining, being a part of education and wanting to be in classrooms. We need incredible people, just incredible people who are deeply committed, wanting to teach. That no one should be discouraged from that. And I feel so sad about that, that our teachers have to deal with folks. And, it's sad that this is about politics, or this is about, I don't know, people's ideological beliefs on how to ensure all kids have a great education. We need lots of people channeling their energy toward this, and there is no one solution. There is no silver bullet to this problem. We need all sorts of things, and what we know for sure that we need is incredible leadership in classrooms and beyond. And so I think, to our core members and alumni, I think we have to just be strong and know that we're part of something that is really important. And I feel really confident that when the story is written, because we will make significant progress for kids growing up in low-income communities, we have to believe that it is possible in our lifetime, because we make the right choices when we believe that for kids every day, that the story will be written and lots of people will be incredible contributors to this, and Teach for America will be a central part of that story. And I think we have to just remember that, and we have to stay committed to improving and, and reflecting and owning the mistakes we've made, because we've made plenty of them, but also being unapologetic about the progress and contribution that we have made.
That's great. All right, let's go ahead and throw it out. We've got Isaac and Elizabeth have microphones. Please catch their eye. As always, I would ask, one, please be kind enough to identify yourself by name and affiliation. And two, please actually ask a question. If we get 15 seconds in, I don't spot a question, we'll give somebody else a chance. Yes, sir.
One way of scaling.
Oh, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Richard Rasmus, lessonpathways.com. One way of scaling what TFA does, but indirectly, would be by influencing schools of education. Are you placing much emphasis on that?
I mean, we have partnerships with schools of education in various regions, and in fact, in Chicago, ran a pilot with the University of Washington, who's doing really incredible work, content-specific, laboratory type of learning that we learn so much from and think there's lots of promise and can see, potentially doing that in other regions. So that's the way that we're engaging with schools of education. We feel like we have a lot to learn and we can contribute to. And so wherever there is, we can build a bridge, we're seeking to do that.
That's great. Isaac?
Hi, I'm Sarah Rosenberg from the Center for American Progress. You spoke a little bit about Chicago. I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about other districts where they're doing innovative things that you might want to scale up in other regions or not.
Yeah. In the Bay Area right now, we have an exciting sort of approach that our executive director and the team is taking there. And they are basically focused on wanting their teachers to be not consumers of a sort of learning environment, but actually like the producers of it. So they really, and this also plays into the millennial mindset, like really owning your own learning and leadership. And so they're very focused on creating collaboratives where, you have first and fifth year teachers coming together to learn together. There's a transformational impact sort of collaborative that I met with a few weeks ago when I was there. And then they're trying to figure out how to use technology to just accelerate learning and have everyone sort of be on their own path, like very differentiated learning as a key thing. That right now what people are most motivated by is like, we have to differentiate and self-learn the way you learn and what you need. And even your entry point into this is going to be different than potentially mine and how you think. Like if you think of this from a content specific thing, like, I'm really good at math and I can make sense of this and this is how my entry point to learning how to teach. That's a way to get me in the door and get my mind going. Others might say, I'm really good with building relationships with families and that's my entry point. And so how do I start there? Knowing you need to get to content, knowing you need to get to all the various pieces, but how to meet people halfway and then really just own their learning. So I'm excited to see what will come of that, and we have other interesting things that are popping up across the country.
Hi, Bill Rice with the National Endowment for the Humanities, not speaking for that agency, but on my own behalf. A question about recruiting. Why limit yourself to college graduates? What about all those experts out there who have master's degrees or PhDs or haven't got quite that far, who are teaching out in the colleges and universities, often to populations such as you serve? This is obviously a historic phenomenon, but I wondered if you've given thought to opening up your ranks to experienced teachers with perhaps, further stronger academic credentials even and experience.
Yeah. Well, anyone can apply to Teach for America, and so everyone is welcome to apply to TFA. And actually, I've misspoken because about 30% of actually our incoming core this last year were young professionals. So people that have done other things and joined us. And so, and we have now a growing number of veterans. We have almost 100 veterans that sort of are seeking their second mission as they return from serving our country, which has been really incredible to get to know these folks. So we do, and actually have a whole initiative to attract sort of that level of people. I think it's really important and actually helps us all learn and accelerate sort of the work that we're doing. But there is a, attracting young folks from colleges is also an important part of our model because we want to get people early on in their career. We want to influence how they view the world, the choices they make in their careers, and we're all most vulnerable or open to change and learning when we're 22 versus 30. We have more opinions, and so I want to expose people as early as possible in classrooms. Yeah.
Isaac?
Hi, Rob Mahaffey with the Rural School and Community Trust and the organizations concerned about rural education. I've read a great deal about TFA's strategic priorities around moving folks into rural places. I think you just established a Rural Leadership Academy with
For
funding,
principals?
for principals with funding, I think, from Walton. dig into this a little bit more. We focus on grow your own strategies, so I'm interested in where TFA is going with staffing classrooms in rural America.
Yeah, about 17% of our current placements are in rural communities. We place in places like the Rio Grande Valley, the Mississippi Delta, and North Carolina, and also native communities. So we're in South Dakota, New Mexico, parts of Oklahoma now, and in Hawaii. And we're deeply committed to this. One of the reflections we have been having as we sort of think about what we've learned in the last 24 years of doing this work is that, we've been asking ourselves the question, are we doing enough to really ensure that we are getting critical mass and scaling? Because what happens in rural communities right now is, people don't stay for very long, and it's hard to keep young people in these communities. And so you need, and the reason what we have observed is people stay when there's just thriving opportunities. And in many of the urban places, you can go teach at a charter school, or you can pick a different school, and there's just access to lots of things. And many of our core members are not from rural communities, but they get there, and so some do fall in love and stay forever, but a lot don't. And so we are thinking a lot about, how can we help and create sort of a place that helps people stay, and are there incentives we could be doing? We've been looking at communities of impact where we just say, wow, you can look at Washington, D.C., you could look at, parts of New York, you can look at L.A. I mean, you could just take these communities and you sort of see the impact that TFA has had on a community alongside many others, but you do see the footprint of Teach for America in it, or the handprint of it. And in rural communities, we're having a harder time finding those stories. Like, you find schools and you find, pods here and there. So it's making us ask ourselves, are we doing enough? And the way our model works now is every community has to self-sustain their funding model. And so, rural communities have less wealth capacity, which is why we rely a lot on public dollars, federal dollars, and, state dollars and district dollars for particularly our rural communities. But should we be doing more? And this is a real question that we are asking ourselves. And as we, finalize our strategic plan that we will be rolling out in the next few months, this is one of the things that we're considering, and how we can more fully contribute, and really do think we need to elevate that conversation to a whole new level.
Elizabeth?
Roberta Stanley. I'm a K-12 education advocate who's losing her voice. In what states have you been less successful, and what would you do differently in those places to become more established?
When you say less successful, what do you mean?
Well, you're in 35 states, so there are 50
And Washington, D.C.
in.
Yeah. Well, we're not in those, not because we don't want to be necessarily. So I guess it just depends on what you mean by less successful. Yeah.
You want to say another word on that, Roberta? What do you mean less successful?
Michigan, because you really wanted to help.
In Detroit?
And heaven knows Detroit needed help. But we have 35 colleges of teacher education in Michigan.
Yep.
And yet the University of Michigan was one of your big recruitment places, and yet those Michigan grads couldn't be placed in Michigan. So there clearly is some kind of breakdown there.
Yeah, so I can speak to Detroit. I'm not sure about this Michigan thing. I mean, the way we place folks is, it depends on state law. So people just need to be able to qualify based on whatever the state regulations are. And if they want to go, to a place like Detroit, we certainly want to put them there, if that's their desire. So I can talk. So Detroit was a place that we actually went into and then left. It didn't leave on our own regard. We were kicked out, is a good way to say it.
And who was responsible for that?
We couldn't get our teachers to be paid, full benefits because of various policies and regulations. They couldn't get certified, and there was not a viable way to sort of exist there. And we've been back there now for a few years and are doing, pretty well. I think a good maybe example is Seattle to discuss, if I'm going to be really reflective. So Seattle is a place where 3 years ago now, 4 years ago now, we opened. We had incredible resistance when we opened. And it was the first sort of experience, and I was at the time managing the field, and I remember thinking, wow, this is a new day. I mean, I could not believe what was happening. I mean, we were getting, principals were getting letters from, different interests every day saying, do not hire Teach for America teachers. They are here to destroy public education. We will riot if you hire a Teach for America teacher. And so we were at a position where we had 37 teachers and there was no way we were going to place them all. And I remember spending a significant amount of time in Seattle. I packed my bags and, was there to manage it. And when we got our alumni together and said, hey guys, some of you are principals, some of you are in these schools, can you help us? Talk to your principals and, and get us in the door. And even they were just scared, literally, like scared to say they were TFA alums because of how bombarded they were getting. I mean, it was very personal. Our executive director there was getting attacked online every day about who she was. They were getting names of our core members, SAT scores, ACT scores, and like publishing these things. I mean, it was horrific. I've never seen anything like it. My learning on all this is we just never should have opened in Seattle that way. What we changed after that is we said we will open nowhere any longer unless we are on the ground for a full year, have really established relationships where we are just like not, the superintendent wanted us, but it was like a contentious battle from the very beginning. And that's no way to go into a community. I mean, that's not helpful to anybody. And so since then, what we do is we will hire the person that's going to become the executive director who actually does the work for a full year, has to establish actually community investment at every level beyond just, the superintendent or the school board. And that has served us well.
Does that kind of pushback have any practical impact on the ability of TFA to do its work, or is that just noise in the atmosphere?
What kind of?
The stuff you just talked about in Seattle, the emails, the controversy. Is there a practical impact, or is that mostly a noise?
Yeah, it had a practical impact that year in Seattle. We ended up placing only like 15 teachers, and we had to deploy the other ones to different regions. And we weren't organized enough and weren't ahead of the game and getting the right people invested. That is not, that would be hard to do in a current, in one of our current regions now, just because we have built such strong, like have the diversity of constituents who are supportive of Teach for America and work really hard to make sure we have strong relationships with principals and superintendents and school board members and community organizations and, parents and, et cetera. So that would be harder to pull off in an existing region.
Isaac?
Hi, I'm Lisa Flores with NEA. I recently, about a year ago, I read an article saying that TFA was beginning to accept DACA recipients.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how that was being affected by the current discourse on immigration as well as the hot topics in education right now.
Yeah. We took a position on DACA a couple years.
And what is DACA is?
Yeah, so it's, ensuring that kids who are undocumented, come to our country undocumented, have been raised in our country, in our playgrounds, have access to are able to pursue a college degree. And it's a deferred action that the president has put forth and said, we are giving legal status to these folks. They have to reapply every 2 years, but are able to have access to all the opportunities that any other kid has. And the reason we took a position on that, so we work really hard to stay in our lane, and we are not interested in getting involved in the fray on all these other topics. But as I said earlier, things impacted in schools every day with kids. We have an interest, and there are other things that do matter, and we're all about like providing kids the opportunities that they deserve. And so for us, when we are teaching, 40% of our kids that we work with are Latino kids. As a teacher, I taught, more than a handful of undocumented kids myself. We just said, we believe that if the president is saying that, these folks can have legal status, that we should ensure that they are, that they have access to a higher education and can be productive members of society and fully contribute, get jobs, et cetera. And this is a good thing for our country. And as a result, we decided that we wanted to also start to recruit DACA folks into our core. So we have 46 DACA teachers now teaching across the country. And it's a pretty powerful thing, you all, to watch these teachers who have grown up in our country but are undocumented teach other kids. And if they're teaching undocumented kids, the hope and inspiration and just the model that this does really provide is incredibly powerful and so important. And, and to watch the skills and potential of these kids is amazing. I mean, they contribute so much to our country. And so so that was an important move for us, and that's what motivated us to do it.
Do you see the number increasing? And 2014, that's how you had 30 applicants, and right now you said you had 46. So do you see that increasing despite the executive action and the whole discourse around that?
Yeah, I mean, well, as long as it is still an executive action, we will continue to pursue. And we have 46 current teachers now, are seeking to have 60 next year, and we'll see how we do.
All right, Elisa, looks like we're about at the end of our time. Love to give you a chance to share a closing thought or two. In particular, just curious, as you think about, TFA's been doing this for 25 years.
Yeah.
And as you guys look forward, thought or two on how folks ought to understand TFA's role and effort to push school improvement?
Yeah. Nobody in our country is doing what Teach for America is doing, which is recruiting at scale incredible young people, straight out of college, young professionals, to care and fully throw themselves into this work of education, to really care about what I believe is one of the greatest civil rights issues of our time, which is ensuring that every kid has access to a great education. Every kid deserves that. Every kid deserves opportunities. We ought to not be a country where you literally can look at zip codes to figure out what choices in life kids are going to have. And that's what we're up against right now. There's so many reasons to be hopeful. Like, real progress has been made. And we just need to stay the course, and Teach for America is part of the solution. And so all I will say is, I hope people will seek to push us, seek to understand and be curious about, what we're doing, and really commit to supporting each other in this very hard work. I'm like, this work is hard enough for us to be fighting with each other and, and making things harder for ensuring that kids truly get access to what they deserve. And so I look forward to the next phase of impact and work that we are going to get to do together.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
The event will be online tomorrow on the AI site. And it's great to have you with us, and good luck with all the work.
Thank you, Rick.